that if Jesus was physically on the earth today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey. Think about that for a minute. He'd be in an airplane preaching the gospel all over the world.
For years, people watched this Louisiana preacher laugh, joke, and roll out one wild story after another, telling themselves it was all harmless fun. They were wrong. Behind that Cajun grin was a man telling the truth the entire time, and most folks were laughing too hard to hear it. At 76, Jesse Duplantis finally stopped softening his message, and what came out of his mouth confirmed everything the doubters always whispered. The words he finally said out loud. In the spring of 2024, Jesse Duplantis sat down beside his wife, Kathy, for one of their filmed living room conversations, and he decided he was done explaining himself to anyone. He looked straight into the camera and said the thing his critics had been waiting decades to hear him admit. He told his audience to look at him, really look at him, because he wanted them to understand that he was a very blessed man, blessed spiritually, blessed physically, and blessed financially. He added that more people had criticized him over his airplane than over anything else he had ever done in his entire life, and he simply did not care anymore. Now, here is why that moment landed so heavily. For most of his life, Jesse had a habit of wrapping his boldest claims inside jokes, so people never quite knew when to take him seriously. This time, there was no punchline waiting at the end of the sentence. He was not asking permission, and he was not apologizing for anything. He was telling millions of viewers that the mansion, the lifestyle, and the famous jet were not embarrassments he needed to hide from anyone. In his mind, they were proof that his message worked exactly the way he always promised it would. What makes this confession even sharper is the timing. He said it only months after his name showed up in a legal filing far away in Colorado. Not long after that, he pulled his program off Daystar television network at the very end of 2024, walking away from one of the biggest Christian broadcasters in the country right in the middle of a separate scandal, swallowing the network alive. Most public figures go quiet when the pressure rises around them. Jesse Duplantis did the opposite, and Kathy sat beside him through every minute of that filmed conversation, nodding gently as if to remind viewers that this was a man finally at peace with every single choice he had ever made. If you grew up watching this couple on Sunday mornings, that moment probably hit you in a strange place, because it forced you to face a feeling most longtime viewers had been avoiding for years. The reason he felt so untouchable while saying all of this out loud traces back to one specific aircraft he had been chasing publicly since long before the world started paying any real attention. The jet he said he would never stop believing in. Back in the spring of 2018, Jesse stood in front of his television audience and pointed at a photo on the wall of a sleek private plane he liked to call his Star Trek ship. He told everyone watching that God had spoken to him and said, "Jesse, do you want to come up where I am?" Then, in his telling, the Lord told him something that would echo across the internet for years to come. He said God told him, "I want you to bleed me for a Falcon 7X." The plane carried a list price near $54 million, and Jesse went even further with a line nobody could unhear. He said that if Jesus were physically walking the earth today, he would not be riding around on a donkey. Instead, Jesse insisted the Son of God would be flying in an airplane, preaching the gospel all over the world. The clip spread like wildfire. Late-night hosts mocked it on national television, and pastors across the country lined up to distance themselves from it as fast as possible. When the outrage peaked, Jesse softened his words just enough to give himself cover. He went back on camera and told people he was not asking them to pay for his plane. He was only asking them to pray for it. And he claimed there was a vast difference between believing in God and asking for money. Plenty of viewers wanted to believe that the walk back was the actual end of it. Here is the part that most people missed at the time. The line about God telling him he was not asked to pay for the plane, but to believe in it was not even new. Years earlier, when Jesse first explained how he received an earlier Cessna jet, he had used the exact same phrasing about driving down the highway and watching a plane fly over his head while God spoke to him. He simply recycled the script and dropped a new model number into the same slot. And the truly stunning twist arrived years later, almost quietly, when he announced during a televised fundraising broadcast that the Falcon 7X was finally sitting in his hangar back in Louisiana. He did not pay the full $54 million sticker price. He found a used model and brought it home for around $21 million instead, which means the man critics laughed at openly for half a decade actually won the argument in the end. The plane was real, the deal was done, and the partner standing beside him at that announcement had been backing this kind of message for almost half a century. To understand how Jesse grew so comfortable asking strangers to fund a luxury aircraft, you have to look at the man sitting across from him in 2016. The friend who taught him to fear flying with strangers. That man was Kenneth Copeland, another titan of the prosperity world, and the two of them filmed a conversation that became absolutely infamous. They were explaining why preachers like them simply could not fly on regular airlines anymore. Copeland leaned in and described commercial planes as long metal tubes filled with demons, calling the experience deadly for a man trying to stay close to God. Jesse nodded along the entire time, agreeing that being packed in with ordinary travelers worked on his heart in a bad way. To millions of people scraping together money for groceries, the idea that two wealthy preachers needed private jets to avoid the spiritual contamination of coach seats sounded almost cartoonish. To Jesse and his friend, it was settled doctrine. This was the relationship that shaped him. The two men appeared together on Copeland's Believer's Voice of Victory broadcast more than 20 times across a single stretch of years, raising money side by side and reinforcing each other's biggest claims, so that neither one ever had to stand alone in the line of fire. A couple of years after that demon talk, Copeland bought a Gulfstream 5 jet from filmmaker Tyler Perry, and he paid for it in cash. Jesse was right there in the same conversation circle when that purchase happened, the two of them treating multi-million-dollar aircraft the way most families talk about choosing a new minivan in the driveway. Copeland built an empire reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars, with some outside estimates climbing far higher than that. Jesse played the warmer, funnier partner who made the whole movement feel friendly instead of frightening. If Copeland was the lightning, Jesse was the laughter that made the lightning easier to swallow. The jet talk and the demon talk were strange enough on their own. The truly eye-opening part was where Jesse actually went home at night. The house that pays no taxes. Out in Destrehan, Louisiana, sits a plantation-style mansion so large that local records struggle to fully capture it. The living space alone stretches past 22,000 square feet, and once you add the surrounding accessory areas, the whole footprint climbs toward 40,000 square feet. Jesse himself once stood at a Believers' Convention and bragged that building it cost around $500 per square foot, then told the crowd to do the math. Here is the detail that turns curiosity into genuine frustration for a lot of people. The mansion is not owned by Jesse as a private citizen. It is owned by his ministry, which means it qualifies as a church parsonage, which means it pays nothing in property taxes. Watchdog researchers estimated that a property valued the way Jesse once valued it would owe well over $100,000 in taxes every single year. Instead, the bill is zero. And as one local official put it bluntly, when somebody is exempt, somebody else has to pay the bill. The late Ole Anthony, who spent years investigating ministries like this one through the Trinity Foundation, did not mince words about any of it. He argued that every neighbor and every donor was effectively helping fund Jesse's lifestyle because each donation became a tax deduction while the mansion sat untouched. He even joked darkly that Jesse seemed to believe in a holy quartet: the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and himself. That same watchdog team also pulled Jesse's flight records years ago and found patterns that raised eyebrows even among his sympathizers. They counted an island-hopping trip across Hawaii that ran more than 2 weeks, another long Hawaiian vacation the very next year, and a string of trips to Las Vegas that did not exactly match the public mission of a tax-exempt ministry. Jesse blocks his flight records from public tracking now, but the numbers that did surface painted a picture his loyal donors had never once been shown. The financial picture was damning enough on its own, yet Jesse had an even bolder pitch waiting in the wings, one that tied your wallet directly to the return of Jesus Christ himself. The promise that giving could speed up the end of the world. In the fall of 2021, during a televised fundraising marathon, Jesse offered his audience a claim that stretched even the boundaries of his own usual teaching. He told viewers that he honestly believed the reason Jesus had not yet returned was that people were not giving the way God told them to give. According to him, once you truly understood this, you could actually speed up the timing of the second coming through your generosity. He even folded the jet back into the joke, telling the crowd that yes, he had a private plane, and they were welcome to have it the day after the rapture, because Jesse himself was heaven-bound. The audience laughed, and once again the humor smoothed over a message that, taken seriously, placed the fate of the entire world on the size of their donations. What made this season so painful was not the sermon itself, it was the timing of it. Right around then, Hurricane Ida slammed into the very parish where his enormous mansion stood, and tens of thousands of his neighbors lost power for days in brutal late summer heat. The local power company reported that 95% of customers in that parish were sitting in the dark just hours after the storm passed through. One local resident named Brandy Abate wrote publicly that outside of his polished videos, she had not seen or heard from his ministry at all. And she told him she was disgusted that the gates of his property stayed closed to people living just steps away. Jesse fired back online, dismissing the complaints as a bunch of malarkey and insisting his ministry was helping people literally all over everywhere. He claimed his team had donated around $100,000 in generators to the relief effort. Reporters who went looking for the families who actually received those generators struggled to find a single recipient inside his own parish. If you were one of the people who scraped together a small donation to that ministry over the years, those reports probably leave a knot in your stomach. Many of his own neighbors had been writing him checks for a long time, and the silence after the storm felt personal in a way the polished broadcasts could never quite cover up. While that storm slowly faded from the headlines, a far quieter problem was already forming hundreds of miles away in the mountains of Colorado. The crypto case and the heaven story behind it all. In early 2024, regulators in Colorado expanded a fraud case tied to a religious-themed cryptocurrency. And when the list of additional defendants finally came out, Jesse Duplantis was on it. The underlying scheme had pulled in around $3.5 million from more than 300 investors before it collapsed. It is important to be precise here because the case against Jesse personally is a civil matter rather than a criminal charge, and his ministry declined to comment when asked about it. Still, seeing a preacher of his stature named in a securities fraud filing alongside more than a dozen other defendants was the kind of thing his harshest critics never honestly expected to witness in their lifetime. To understand why people believed Jesse could promise almost anything, you have to know the story that built his legend in the first place. Decades ago, he claimed that in the year 1988, he was physically taken up to heaven. He described an angel meeting him at the edge of the experience and feeding him fruit so his body could handle the glory of God. He described seeing the Book of Life as a giant golden volume more than 5 feet tall and bound in shimmering cloth. And he said he saw a fully furnished mansion already waiting for him, decorated to match his own taste, right down to the smallest detail. He even described the appearance of Jesus himself in that vision, calling him a shaft of pure light with nail holes in his hands about the size of a nickel. That detail is the thread that ties his entire life together. A mansion in heaven decorated just for him, and a mansion on earth built exactly to his liking. The two stories rhyme so perfectly that they almost feel like one continuous sermon stretched across decades. Even people who admired Jesse noticed that the heaven account seemed to shift slightly each time he retold it, with one longtime listener pointing out that he had heard 2 versions that did not match. Yet the story worked, because it gave his followers a reason to trust that this man had inside information nobody else could verify or contradict. And the strangest part of all is who Jesse Duplantis used to be before any of this began. The rock singer who walked into a bathroom and never came out. The same. Long before the jets and the mansion and the heaven stories, there was a young man from the Louisiana bayou who went by the stage name Jerry Jackson. He grew up in a Cajun Catholic family in Houma, one of 9 children, and even his own mother used to call him a heathen to his face. A neighbor taught him to play the blues on a 1-stringed banjo when he was a boy, and that small instrument was the seed of everything that came after it. By his teenage years, he was singing and playing bass guitar for a band called Summer Wine, touring with glam and heavy metal acts, and living a life he later described in blunt terms. By his own account, he consumed large amounts of alcohol daily and struggled with heavy substance use, later describing those years as a period where he felt disconnected from reality without ever leaving his own home. In the middle of all that wildness, on the 6th of June in the year 1970, he married a woman named Kathy, who would later stand beside him for every camera and every controversy that followed. His turning point came 4 years into that marriage, and even this story carries his trademark mix of the sincere and the theatrical. He says he was alone in a hotel room in the year 1974 when he flipped on the television and landed on a Billy Graham crusade. As Graham invited viewers to give their lives to God, Jesse says the love of God reached right through the television screen and grabbed him by the heart. He jumped off the bed, rushed into the bathroom, and could not even shut the door behind him before. In his words, God got in there with him too. By the time he stepped behind a pulpit for the first time only a few years later, he had already lived a life most preachers only warn their congregations about. And that contrast became his entire calling card. That is the heart of who Jesse Duplantis became. A born entertainer who traded one stage for another and never lost his gift for holding a crowd. He learned that a joke could carry a claim too heavy to say plainly, and that a smile could soften a demand that should have made people uncomfortable. For half a century, the audience laughed and assumed the comedian was kidding around. The suspicion was never really a secret. He had been confessing the whole time, and we simply mistook the confession for a punchline. If this gave you a new way to see the man behind the laughter, drop your honest thoughts in the comments below right now. I genuinely want to know whether you walked away thinking he was misunderstood all this time, or whether he finally got caught telling on himself.